All right, so the first part of today is about things that just add a little bit of joy and excitement to your pages. So we're going to talk about some animations and transitions that we can do with CSS to just make our pages look a little cooler. Okay. We're going to spend a lot of time today in W3 schools because they have really good examples and tutorials that we can play with. Because some of this stuff is like you need art assets or some idea of what you're trying to create to really show this off. So let's look at CSS animations first. I'm going to go to W3 schools and we're going to go to animations. I'll type in actually CSS animations. See what page that takes us to. Perfect. Good. So let's take a look at this specific example. You'll notice that this element over here is changing colors between red and yellow. And it's doing that, right? This is the div. We're saying it's got a width of 100, it's got a height of 100, it's got a background color that starts at red. Okay? Then we're saying it's going to use the animation name example. So whatever this value is in animation name needs to match the actual keyframes that we're going to set up here. Okay? And then it tells the duration of the animation, so 4 seconds. Now what makes this special is that we can define any type of animation we want in here by just simply creating a keyframes and then giving it a name, right? So we can say keyframes Eric's version, right? And that goes in between curly brackets. So if I was to change this to Eric's version here, right, it's going to use this animation instead of that animation. Okay? Now, there are a few ways to set up these keyframes. The simplest way is the from and to version. Okay? And so we can come in here and say background color purple, and it's going to animate from purple to background color green. Okay? And so if we run this now, it's going to use my animation. You'll notice as soon as I click, well, it happens too fast, but it goes, the div is starting at red, but we're telling it to immediately start this Eric's version animation that goes from purple to green, right? And when the animation finishes, it eventually goes back to red. You see how that is done there? We can change the duration, right? I can say I want this animation to happen slower. And so now the transition is going extremely slowly. Or I can say I want this to go really fast, right? So we could do kind of a red light, green light, yellow light type of thing. So we could say yellow to red, and let's set the final color to green, right? Well, let's change this to 8 seconds, right? So yellow becomes red, which will eventually, after the animation is complete, switch back to green. Okay. Generally, when you're doing animations like this, you want to you want to specify, you want either your starting color or your ending color to be the same thing, right? Now, these don't just have to be colors, and that's what makes this really interesting, right? So we can come in here and say from, and we can put in any CSS properties that we want in here. I can say height, 100px, width, 100px, 2, and I can put in more rules. So I can say it's also going to grow, height, 200px, width, 200px. Okay? And when we run this, right, you'll notice that it's also growing. Other cool things you can do with this is literally any CSS property. So we were talking earlier about position absolute, right? And so I can say top, 20 pixels, left, 20 pixels, right? Let's see where does that put us? Okay, perfect. Let's go down a little further. Let's say 40 and 40. Okay. And we can animate from, let's make it so it stops growing. So I can say, from top 40 pixels to top 200 pixels, right? So now it's going to slide down the screen. We can animate any element using any CSS property. So it's creating a transition from one state to another, and it's going to try to do it as gracefully as possible. Does anyone have any questions with this? Other things that we can do is with this type, right? So we can set up individual keyframes, right? So this is from to, right, which is basically 0% to 100%. But we can also specify a bunch of steps in there, right? So we can say, 0% is that, 100% is this. But we can say, hey, at the 50% mark, we want it to be, right? We can do anything we want here, right? So we can even say, it's going to go from here to there, but it's going to go to 200 px to begin with, right? So when it gets to 50%, let me see if I can. Let's actually make this left 200 pixels. Maybe that'll show it off better, right? So you see, it first goes there, and then it's going to continue going down from the previous position, right? So it's going over to here and then over to here, because we've set up a step in here. We can put any number of steps in here that we want to define, right? So if we wanted to get very specific about our transitions, we could say at the 40% mark, for example, we want the background color to be purple, right? So it's going to transition to purple, then it's going to jump to yellow, and then it's going to go back to red, right? So we can set any number of steps between 1 and 100. We have that flexibility here if you wanted to get that granular with your animations. What are some, who's got a suggestion of another CSS property that might be fun to play with animations with?
What about the borders?
Yeah, we could do borders, right? So let's say border 1px solid black, right? And let's just grow it. Let's make it right. It goes from 1px solid black to 3px solid black to 6px solid black, 8px, and then let's have it finally end at 15 per px, right? So this is going to get a crazy big border as it grows, right? You can see that it's growing with it as we do this, right? The at keyframes designation with a name following it lets us attach an animation by that name to any element, right? If we had a second div in here, right? Div, and let's give this one a class second, right? You can do div.second, and we'll just make this one the same thing, but in a different location, hopefully. Right? Let's do relative on this one, actually. That'll be easiest. So now you can see we've got two animations running simultaneously on two separate div elements using the same name, right? They don't have to be, right? We could use example here, and so now we can have multiple animations running at the same time. So this is the default one that was created when we joined the page, or we can change it and have them both running ARX version. Cool. The duration specifies the length of time in seconds, so it'll be like 4s, 10s. Another interesting property, right? You notice that this runs once and stops. We can specify animation iteration. Is it count? I always forget. Yep, count. And we can say we want it to run 2 times. Let's make this 4 seconds so the next version doesn't take so long. And you'll see it just starts over again at 0 and runs again. And it stops at 2. The other property that you probably want to have, the other value that you're going to use in the animation iteration count often is infinite. If you type in the word infinite, now it will run forever. Or at least this purple one will. We didn't put it on this other element. Let's take this one out. Oh, cool. Interesting. Because we've specified that the animation iteration count on this element, oh, that's for the div. Yeah, so it applies to both of them. If we'd put it just on this one, just on our second, right? Because this only applies to the second element we created, right? The first one will only run once. The second one will run forever. Everyone tracking? We can also do this with, it would be very easy for us to do something very cool with our background, right? So we can say background color, what do we pick here? Medium sea green, right? And so we can come in here and say animation name body animation, and we'll say animation duration 4 seconds. Okay. And then let's create that keyframe. So we'll say at keyframes body animation, and we'll say from background color medium sea green to background color medium violet. Is that even a color? Apparently not. Figures that the one time I want to use that I actually like the color thing in our thing is the one time I don't have that available. Let's go with style. What is color medium color medium purple. There we go. Medium purple. We run that. So you see that the background color is going between green and purple. And if we wanted to, which we probably should, we'd want to make this animation count. Wait, what was it? Animation iteration count infinite. And so now we have a background that subtly shifts colors between green and purple, and then it jumps back to green. So the way to fix that, right, we could add extra steps. So we could say 0% to 50% to 100%, and go back to medium sea green so that it doesn't have a jarring jump like that. So we run this now. That will transition nicely between the green and the purple. Okay, we probably would want to make this, if we were doing something like this for our background color, we'd probably want to make it long, right, so that it's not so distracting to our users. Right, so now this is 12 seconds, and it's just subtly shifting between green and purple. And if we were to put something like this, let's show this off in the real world, in a product that we were working on the other day. Here, I'll do it with mine, the fake Pinterest product. Where are we at here? Oh, did I close it? Yeah, I did. That's unfortunate. Open folder. What do I call it? Flexbox. Perfect. Don't save. Cool. So if I was to just come in here and we're good to go. Let's launch our live server. Right, so you see that I have this purple color behind here. That's kind of jarring, and that was in the flex. The flex attribute. Where is that? Yep, perfect. Right here. So what I would do is I would say, instead of flex, I want to do background color medium sea green. Okay. Animation name. What did I call it? Body animation. Okay. Animation iteration count infinite. Animation duration 12 seconds. And perfect. Now if I reload this page, or when I save this file, okay, save, you'll see that behind the scenes my product now has like a subtly shifting background color. That's pretty cool, right? And it looks nice. Maybe I would pick different colors. Maybe I'd make it less blue and purple, but it adds some flavor, it adds some texture behind the scenes in a way that to some people or to some designs would look pretty good. And maybe I would even come here and say, I love this. I just want it to be even longer, right? I want it to be less distracting. And so maybe I make it 30 seconds so that it just subtly shifts over time between those two colors. It's hardly even noticeable. But if I'm here using this page all the time, like, I don't know, it adds a little bit of flavor and a little bit of uniqueness. Right? Let's close that one. Go ahead, Karif.
Is it possible to make like have an image inside of the box and have the color disappear and show the image? Is that possible? Or is that a lot of coding?
It would not. There's several ways we could do this. Trying to think of I would probably have.
If it's taking you off subject, don't worry about it.
No, I mean there's several ways we can do it. We could position an element on top of the image, right? We could say, hey, this position is. Let's try one out, right? How can I show this real quickly? It's easily possible. If I had it already set up structurally in the HTML, we could very easily show that. If you'd love to actually see this happen, we could code it live on Friday if you'd like to schedule some office hours, or we could do it if we have extra time and everyone's interested. We can play with those kind of things because they're pretty easy to code up, but it'd probably take about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I can wait till Friday.
Okay, perfect.
All right with you.
Yep. Cool. All right. What else do we need in animations? Iteration count and animation fill mode. Let's take a look at animation fill mode because that's a good one. Animation fill mode. Yeah, perfect. They have an example? Yes. All right. So the animation fill mode here is, we have the option to say none, where it's going to have the default value. Forwards, which is the element is going to retain the style that we used in the last keyframe, or backwards, where it's going to go in the opposite direction. So this is a great example, right? So we know that our element jumps to the top. If I was to come in here and say animation fill mode forwards, right? Let's run this now, and keep your eye on this this second one. Right? Goes that. But if we do backwards, right? So keep an eye on this second one. Now it's going to reverse itself, I think. I don't really know what this is doing. Let's see if we can read the documentation and figure this out. CSS animations do not affect an element before the first keyframe is played or after the last keyframe. Animation fill mode specifies a style for a target element when the animation is not playing. Oh, that one's infinite. Oh, okay, I see. So if we did this on the other one, the one that stops, right? So you see it goes from, right? It jumps back to green. Okay. If we were to come in here and say animation fill mode, we put it on this one, and change this to forwards. Forwards. Right? This should do something different when it's done. Yeah, it leaves it in place. So whatever the end point was of our element, it stops it there, right? So if you wanted to have a progress bar that fills up to 100%, you don't want it to jump back to the default state of 0. So you could do animation fill mode forwards. If we change this to backwards, let's see what the behavior will be. That's kind of the default behavior where it goes back to the original state. And then what was the other option it had? Both. Interesting. I don't know what both will do. Let's try both. Oh. Both. It did nothing. I don't know. That's weird. Let's see what this. They have a both example, so let's see what both does here. We run it. Let the div element get the style values set by the first keyframe before the animation starts and retain the style values from the last keyframe. Hmm. Some of these animation things are kind of wonky. You'd have to kind of know what you're trying to accomplish, and you'd just fiddle with it until it works. I don't use some of these properties very often. But just be aware that animation fill mode is there, and if you wanted to have it not jump to the end, you can set that as an option. Animation delay, right? So these animations are starting as soon as we look. Oh, I just reset it. Dang. These animations are starting as soon as you jump to the. Let's add a position absolute top 40px. Right. Let's just add a from top 40px to top 200px. Right. So you'll notice the animation begins as soon as we load the page, right? But we can do animation delay, and this also takes a time type of value, and so we can say we want it to start 4 seconds after the page loads, right? So now that I run this, count to 4, and now the animation begins. Okay, so if you want it to not happen immediately, if there was some animation you wanted to draw the user's attention to, but there's so much stuff that's happening when the page loads, maybe you want it to delay 5 or 6 seconds. It's completely up to you guys. Or maybe you want it to happen, after a button click has happened. Those are some of your options. The animation timing function is another really interesting one. Let's see if they have any good animation timing. Yeah, perfect. So, right, linear is the default, where it kind of goes from start to finish all the way around. But if we do, if we change this to one of the other values, right, ease in or ease out, where are we at here? Ease, that's not the right one. Right? So linear is just going from 0 to 100 in equal steps, but we can do something like ease in. We run this, and it's going to slowly ramp up to speed before going full speed. Okay, so it kind of, here let's change this animation delay. Let's make this 9 seconds, right? So it'll go even slower, right? You see it slowly picks up speed before going full. Then we have, here let's actually move this over to one of the ones we have. It's maybe easier to see. Let's take this out. Let's turn this down. Right. You see that it slowly works its way up. We can also do ease out, where it will go at full speed immediately and slowly bring itself to a stop at the end, right? If we run this now, right, it starts really fast, but then it slows down at the end. Maybe we make this, let's make this like 400 pixels so it has further to travel. It's maybe easier to see. So you see it goes at full speed immediately and then slows itself down as you get there. We can do also ease in and ease out at the same time, right? So we can have it start slow and end slow, so it'll be fastest in the middle of the animation. Right? It's kind of like a linear, like a curve, right? Any questions about the animation timing function option? And if you for any of these properties at any time, I would encourage you to just go to W3 Schools and look at animation timing function, right? Because they're going to have very good concrete examples that hopefully describe this in great detail. I use this so infrequently that most of the time when I'm using animations for anything, I have to go and refresh myself to say, oh, what does this one do? And then I play with it until I get the effect that I'm looking for. Right? Oh, cool. They even have a nice little tool here where they show you the examples of, right, ease in. Linear is the default, right? So it's just going to go at the correct speed from start to finish. Every frame of the keyframe animation is going to go if you can imagine this taking 30 seconds, if there's a step at every second, each one will be exactly the same. Any questions about animation timing? Go ahead, Olivia.
So when you showed us Leah's website with that card game, did she use animation or is that JavaScript?
Yeah, she used tons of animations.
Oh, okay.
All in CSS. That was really so. When we did the last cohort, that was her very first project. When she was learning about Flexbox, she said, "I'm going to make a whole bunch of cards," because I was calling them cards in the thing, and that inspired her to say, like, I should actually make them as playing cards. And then she added, when we learned the animation step on this day, she went and she added animations to the cards so that it would like ease in and rotate and move to a spot. None of that was done with JavaScript. It was all CSS. And if we go to if we go to her page, right, these are all swooping in purely with CSS. And if we look at our source code, cards, right? Oh, those are the actual cards themselves. So if we go here, where's it again here? Right? She's using some of the other one, right? So here's her keyframe for fade in. She's fading in from opacity 0 to opacity 100%, and then she's using the rotation thing so that it kind of spins into place. Same technology as these keyframes, and then she has a few of them, right? She's saying, hey, I want to use, for every card that's on the page, we're going to do the fade in animation, and it's going to take 70.75 seconds. So it happens fairly quickly, right? And if we were to, right, that's what's coming in from 0, and it's going. It's probably hard to see on the screen, but it goes from like transparent to solid, and rotates as it's doing it. She, one of the other things that she's doing in here fairly well, she has this transform. We're going to learn about that later today. And the transform is kind of like an animation, but it happens automatically. So instead of having to define keyframes, you can say, hey, I want to just transform this. So if you look at her page, when we hover over the card, she's saying, whatever the size the card is, make it go to 1.5 times the size of that card. That's the scale function. And we're going to learn about transforms and all the things you can transform later today. And then when we hit, right, it's doing that same card animation, swooping them out from the top to bottom.
Okay, so can I show you another website that I really, really like, but
yes.
I don't know if that's animation.
Do you want to send me a link, or do you want to share it?
I'll send the link real
Okay.
quick. Oh.
15 or even maybe as early as 10 years ago, all of that animation stuff that you see on Leah's page, we would have had to do that with JavaScript.
That's really cool that it's changed that much since then.
Okay, so this I'm scrolling down, and as I scroll, it's basically doing this cutesy little platformer type game. This is probably a bunch of, let's see if there's any keyframes in here. So this is probably JavaScript from the complexity of this, but they've got everything obfuscated, so it would be we'd have to really dive in and see what's happening. We could probably do it. We inspect an element, right? Like as we scroll. Okay. So yeah, as we scrolling, he's got a bunch of layers that are just moving in and out of the frame. In and out of the screen, you can see. So this might be JavaScript. It might be all done in CSS, but it would be hard for us to. No, because it's tied to scroll, right? So that he's got something attached to the scroll down function. So there's probably. Let me look in here. Let's see it. Where would we go to look? Application. One of these will probably let us. Where would we see this at? Performance, maybe?
It's okay if you can't figure it out. I just thought it was a cool portfolio
Yeah.
type of website.
There's a whole bunch of JavaScript in here for events. They're watching the mouse move event. Yeah, that's probably how he had to do it. But it's a cool concept. Cool. Any other questions about CSS animations? Right. So all that matters, and just to reiterate, is when you're defining your keyframes and you give your animation a name, these individual, whether you're using percentages or you're using the from and the to option, right? Everything that goes in the curly brackets is the same as if you had a selector attached to that element, right? So you can write multiple lines of CSS in here. It doesn't have to just be one thing. You can just imagine as if for every keyframe that runs, they're taking this entire block of CSS and basically, attaching it into here as if it was a thing, right? That's essentially what's happening behind the scenes. They're saying, we define this animation. You've attached the animation to this element, .flex. Every time a frame happens, change this value. And it's doing some math behind the scenes saying, I need to go from this color to this color over 100 steps. How do I get there? And so behind the scenes, the browser is smart enough to say, okay, well, this color is actually, if we, 58, 70, 179, and this color is actually, right? So all it's going to do is say, hey, within 100 steps, I have to go from 58 to 147. I have to go from 179 to 112, and from 112 to 216. So it's just doing simple math under the hood, right? If you can imagine there being 100 steps here. So it knows that it can just simply get us between those two colors. Karif, go ahead.
So to make the animations situational, that would be JavaScript, right?
Yeah, so if you want the animations to happen when somebody does something, you would generally do it with Java. You would maybe say, like, you click a button and you add a class that has an animation attached to it. Another way, so we're going to look at transform later today, and what transform does is that gives you some of that flexibility, so you can go into the hover, right? So Leah's hover example. Well, here, let's just do it one of these cards, right? So I can do transform scale 1.5, right? Oh, geez. Oh, I should have put it on hover, right? So I could take these properties, and I could have said .flex hover transform scale 1.5, right? So now, right, when, oh, I shouldn't have put it on flex, I should have put it on, what do I call these cards? Box. So when I hover over this, it's going to do that event. You can do it, we could have done this with an animation, or we can do it with a native property like transform by hooking it then to a CSS specific pseudo selector for like a hover or a click or an active, right? So the ones that we have available to us in CSS, we can do it this way. We could also do it with JavaScript. We could say, hey, when you click this element, right, the box element is going to get the get bigger class. And we'll explore that when we get into JavaScript next week. Oop, take that out. Any questions? All right, cool. It is 4:51. Let's take our first break. Come back at 5:05 and look at some more. We'll start looking at transform and stuff, okay? This next section will answer some of the questions that Karif was asking about, and that is the transition property of CSS. So we're going to use W3 Schools again because they've got very good examples, right? And so what you've done is we've got a red div here, okay, and it has a hover property that says width of 300 pixels, right? So we're pretty used to that. I'm going to take this out and run it, right? So as soon as I hover over it, it gets full width. It goes from 100 pixels wide to 300 pixels wide. But the transition property lets us say, hey, we want to transition the width, and we want it to take 2 seconds, or 3 seconds, or 4 seconds, right? And so now, when we run this, it slowly transitions to that size, right? it's similar to the animation, right? We could have written this as an animation and said, hey, on the hover, it uses this animation to animate from 0 to 100. But the transition is more in line with user action than an animation would be, right? If we did this the animation route, right, we could say on the hover, animation name, hover it. Right. If I was to come in here and make keyframes and hover it, and we do from width 100 pixels to no colons here, to width 300 pixels. Right, if we were to run this, like it doesn't even work, right? Because hover is a pseudo element, right? So the way to do it based on user interaction is to use the transition property, right? So we say transition width and 2 seconds. Let's take these keyframes out. Let's do width 300 pixels. Run. Okay, we can change the speed here. We can say, hey, we want this to happen in 4 seconds, so it'll be slower. Okay, or we can be faster. We can say, hey, we want this to happen pretty snappily. Right? You'll also notice that when we mouse out of this, when we leave the hover state, it automatically transitions backwards, right? So if it goes to full, then it goes back to, right? So it's a very gradual, pleasant thing. Now, what if we wanted to do two transitions at the same time, right? We wanted to do width and height, right? If we put height in here, 300 pixels, right? We want this box to grow. We run this. It's going to immediately jump to the full height and slowly slide out to be the full width. If we wanted to do two at the same time, we can come in here and put a comma in and put in height 1 second. Right? And now it's going to grow both directions. We can put any number of transition options in here. We can say background 1 second, and we can say the background color goes to blue. That same property. We can also have these transitions happen at different speeds, right? So we can say the height is going to take 2 seconds, and the background color change is not going to happen until a little bit later, 4 seconds. These numbers, these durations, do not have to all be the same. So you can specify how big or how fast you want these to go. You can put it on any number of properties that exist in your page. Right, so if we wanted to say, border was the example 1px solid red. Maybe we do border 4 seconds, and we'll make this, let's make this a different color, blue. And we'll say border 1px, let's make this 4px solid red. Right? So it starts with a little blue border, and when I hover over it, it's going to eventually grow into a 4 pixel wide, pretty big border. Right? And then it transitions back. So you have, with the transition property, any state that you want to change, like in the pseudo element, right? So we're defining what the end result will be in our hover state. But we're saying we want it to transition to that hover state over this period of time. Any one that is not included in this list is going to just be applied instantaneously. So if I take that out, you'll see we get the border right away, and the only thing that's changing is the width. Same as when it leaves. Okay? There are a few other interesting properties, right? We can set up a transition. This transition is the most frequent way that you're going to define these. But this is the shorthand property. Right? What we're actually setting when we say a transition width to S is that we're saying the transition delay, right? Transition timing. Here it is. Transition property is width. The transition duration is 2 seconds. And then the timing function is linear by default, and there's a delay of 1 second, right? So if we hover over this, right, you can see that after a second, it begins to grow the width. We could have shortened this as transition width 2s linear 1s, I think. Is that the right shorthand of this? Yeah, perfect. And we can do this with multiple. If we were to come in here and say height 2s linear 1s. And let's change the height here. Height 200 pixels. Right. So the transition itself is separated by a comma for the different number of properties we want to pick. Okay. We can also have, we can, if we'd said here, we want this height to happen in 1 second, and we want it to happen immediately, right? So it immediately changes the full height, and then it spreads out to the width. We have a whole bunch of properties in here that we can play with. Linear is the default, but just like with our animations when we were talking about the different easing types, right? So we can make this ease in, or let's make it ease, for example. Let's make this 0 seconds as well. Right, so the height is easing into that. Let's make this 2 seconds. So you'll notice the height finishes before the other one because it has a different timing. Linear is from 0 to 100, just like with animations. But when you tell it to ease, it's going to start out slowly and then ramp its way up to full speed. So it is finished slightly before the height. Transitions are extremely powerful for letting us do those types of things, where we're going to say, when the user hovers over this box, when the user hovers over this link, please change it to this, but do it slowly, right? A great example of this, if you look at, if you look at these links up here, the default for this link, if we were to go to, where did I define these? Menu, there we go. So I had already put a transition in here because I like the way it looked, right? The default is as soon as I hover over this link, it changes to the blue, right? But what I wanted to have happen is that I wanted there to be a slight delay so that it feels a little bit more organic, right? So, and the delay I put in was, 0.3 seconds, right? So I didn't even add a very big delay. I want it to almost happen immediately, but I wanted it to slowly happen so that it's not a jarring, from white to blue immediately. Okay. You'll also notice that I am using the transition special character all, right? So I'm saying any property that is defined in here is going to be changed, right? So if I'd come in here and said font, or let's do font size 64 pixels, right? That will also be taken into account rather than using the other way where I would have had to come in here and say font size to S. Right, so if you wanted to just operate on anything that you define inside your hover element or your hover rule, you can use the shorthand of all. Any questions about transition? These are, again, things that you put in your product when you're in the polishing stage, when you want things to look nice, right? So, a great example of this is that yesterday we made it so that these cards would immediately go to this, right, to full speed. Now that I've got this working the way that we want to from a design standpoint, I would probably go in to wherever we put this thing. We put it hover. Yeah, there we go. Yep. What is this, in the box? Yeah. So I would go in the box and change up this I already put it in here. But I would maybe change up this transition speed so it's not quite so jarring. I'd maybe make it 0.8 seconds. Right, so that when I have to reload the page. so that it doesn't immediately jump to, right, and that's, you notice the background color is changing to white, and getting a little bit more height auto. Oh, I would have to put it on the P here. So let's do box P. Where did we have that? Oh, here it is. So I'd have to put a transition in here as well. Transition all 0.4 seconds ease. Right. So now when I hover over this, once I reload the page, that's too fast. Height auto. Maybe I make this 2 seconds to see if that will show up here. Yeah, there we go. No, it's still not working. So some of these, because I'm using complicated selectors like this is the polishing step we were talking about. Like, it sometimes takes longer and it's fiddly. Like, why isn't this working? I don't know. I'd have to like try 50 different things to see if I can get this to slowly slide open. Maybe what I need to do instead of going straight to auto would be to specify a height, so that the browser doesn't just say, okay, the auto amount of space we need to have here is rendered. If I put this to be like 250 pixels, maybe, yeah, there you go. Now it slides. So auto just doesn't work, because auto is one of those special properties behind the scenes that the browser is going to be like, what is the size I need? I'm going to jump to that immediately so I can tell, so I can figure that out. When we had it, oh, and then it's ease out. So I'd want to have, so you see that like when it slides open, now that I put a thing in there, I would probably have to pick a size that is correct, because then it also slides back down. Any questions about transitions though? This page is really good because they show you a bunch of good examples. These are really nice ways to make your product feel more alive, to make whatever your design is a little more interesting. Any questions? No? All right, the next thing we're going to look at is a transform. Okay, this was one of the ones we were looking at a little bit earlier. Transforms is when we want to manipulate and shift the rendering of an element, right? So by default, everything in HTML and in CSS by default is just like rectangles, right? Boxes. Everything is very rigid. Transform lets us change that behavior. So let's go here and do CSS transform. And with this property, we can rotate our elements, right? So let's look at these, right? So we can rotate them, in this example, 20 degrees. If we skew it, it's like turning it into a trapezoid. So it's still kind of rotating it, but it's like pinching the corners and pulling it out. And we can use scale. We can say, hey, I want to make this stretch, right? It's not making it bigger. It's not changing the height here. It is scaling it. It's saying scale it up, okay? You can do scale Y, which is going to scale in the horizontal direction, or scale X, which would scale it scale X would be in the horizontal, scale Y is in the vertical, like up and down. So if we were to change this to scale X, and we run here, you can see now this is stretched. This one down here is stretched. The height didn't change, even though it's rendered as bigger. If we were to inspect this element, you see the height, the width here is 150 pixels, but if you actually look at the computed size, it won't even show it because it's been scaled. That's unfortunate. The tooling isn't even good enough to keep up and let us, but you'll also notice that it scaled it off of the window, right? Because it was in place already, and the scaling happened, right? So, right, when we scaled it, it went off of the screen, off the edge of the screen. So you have to be very careful with the placements of your elements. This is rotate, skew, and scale. Those are the three things you can do with transforms. Okay, you can combine these, right? you can combine these, and here's a good example. It was on the transition page. Where are we at here? Transition page. Often what you'll do is that you'll put a transform in a transition. Right, here's their example, right? So when we hover over this, it rotates 360 degrees. It goes one full loop, and then it goes back. Because we said we're going to transform 2 seconds, and the transform in here was set to be rotate 180 degrees. If we'd set this to scale scale 1.5, let's try that. Now it's going to scale out, right? Or we could do scale 1.1. Maybe this will be a little smaller. Cool. If we wanted to just scale in one direction, right, we could scale Y or scale X, right? Or we could skew, right? Skew. Skew needs a degree, doesn't it? Let's say 45 degree. Yeah, there you go. So now we're showing off that stretch effect in action, right? Turning it into like a rhombus or some kind of weird polygon. Does everyone understand the transform option? There's a whole bunch of specific options that you can put in here as values. These are little like CSS functions, and they're going to, which one you use is going to depend on the style that you're going for, what effect you're trying to perform. You can also do a 3D translation or a matrix multiplication. So if we do translate is moving it in 2-dimensional space. They don't have an example here that we could play with, but you can also do this in 3-dimensional space and make it come bigger or smaller at the same time. So often what you'll see this used for behind the scenes is from, if you ever go watch some really good YouTube videos from excellent designers who spend all day making really cool CSS designs, they will use these type of, the CSS transform property to make cool effects like a glowing button, so that like a neon sign, for example. So you would take a mirror of the element, then make it blurry, and then put it underneath the element so it looks like realistic lighting, like shining on the ground. Let's look at some of these things are really powerful. I almost never use them myself, but I don't do much front-end design. For those of you like Olivia, maybe this would be a cool tool to add to your toolbox, where you're going to just really add some spice to a customer's web page, or make something fly around the screen and get bigger and smaller. In that example that you showed us from that other page, right? Like some of those effects that were animation effects could be achieved using transitions and transforms like this. Any questions about transitions, transforms, or animations? They all have different uses. Karif, when you were asking earlier about like what would we do if we want it to be on user action, right? Transitions is how we add it to like a hover effect or to a click event, purely in CSS.
Okay.
But you got to do it in such a way.
When we start learning about JavaScript, there are other ways we can do this in JavaScript as well. Maybe get a little bit more granularity or some control. But in general, when you're working on purely the design aspect, you want to do as much of this in CSS as possible, because the browser is going to be more efficient at doing this in the rendering engine, rather than having the JavaScript engine telling the page what to change. Let's take a look at some of these other cool things that we can do stylistically to make our page look cooler. So let's go to the box shadows. Right. So if we do box shadow, there is a box shadow property that will let us add shadows to our elements. It's creating like a shadow fake element here. So you see we've got a couple of, we've got example 1 div, which has, it's a paragraph with some text. And then we've defined a box shadow that is 5 pixels by 10 pixels. We can also specify colors. We can say, hey, we want it to be 88888, right? So that's a gray. Or we can specify a color like red, like in this example down here. If we can, part of the joy of working with box shadows like this is that you can kind of get a sense or kind of start to decide what kind of, does my page have texture, right? And so oftentimes I will play with these as a part of that final polishing step, just like with the transitions and things like that, where I'll come in here and I will say, yep, I definitely want a shadow. I probably don't want it to be pure black, so maybe I'll make this, 555 or something like that, right? So that starts to look pretty good. Maybe 5 pixels is too severe. 3 pixels, 3 pixels, right? Cool, that's great. Now I'm starting to get happy with this. And a great example from our fake Pinterest site, like if I want these to be cards, maybe these boxes need a box shadow. Box shadow. And we maybe say 2 pixel by 2 pixel, and we make it like 666. Right, so like not quite, yeah. So now they look like they have a little bit of a they're like off the table a little bit, right? So that feels more like a card. And maybe I would tweak this and play with this and say maybe 3 pixels is what I really need. Okay, interesting. And I would just fiddle with these numbers until it got to a state where I was happy with the way it looked and happy with how it made my page improve. Another thing that you can do with box shadows is that we can choose to blur. We can add a blur radius, right? So by default, if we do, So here's a great example that shows this off and illustrates it perfectly, right? This is a 10 pixel by 10 pixel gray box shadow. It has perfectly straight lines that match the element that is above it. But if we choose a third option, right? If we say, I want to blur this 10 pixels, so I want it to be 10 pixels of blurriness, right? And we can do this. Gosh, we should have. Let's go back to this example, right? So we're here, right? If I was to add, right, looking at this box shadow, if I was to say 10 pixels here, now it has blurred 10 pixels worth of shadow. I can make this even more extreme, 20 pixels. And so now it's blurring out even more. It's spreading out that black that would have been placed purely on the spot where the box shadow was defined, right? Like these are the edges of that element, and it's saying, I want you to expand beyond that boundary in some kind of random dispersal pattern, 20 pixels. So now you'll notice that the box shadow goes quite a bit further, and it even extends above the element a little bit. Okay? That is the blur option, and we can do that by placing our third number in here. So this first number, right, is the left and right of our box shadow, right? If we change this to 5, right, you'll see that it pops out to the right. If we make this a negative number, -5, it's going to pop out to the left. 0 would be perfectly centered, right? So if we had a box shadow that was 0, 0, 0, or in, if we wanted to use precise digits, 0 pixels by 0 pixels by 0 pixels, right? That is the same as having no box shadow at all. If we change this to 10 pixels, right? Now, this page a little small. Oh, it's full width. Let's change this to width, 500 pixels. Yeah. So you see that it pops out just at the edge. And if we were to go margin left, 50 pixels. And if we wanted to have this be on the right, we would do -10. Now we've got a box shadow over here. But box shadows generally get interesting when you offset the height as well, right? So we would do something like 10 here. And now you'll notice that the box that was previously flush to the left, right? Right here, it's perfectly just going to the left. When we put in this top or bottom parameter here, it moves it down 10 pixels. And the same is true of this element as well. If you wanted for some reason to have the shadow going to the top, right, a negative number there would put it that way. And then this third number here is the blurriness, right? So if we did 10 pixels here as well, right, it adds a little bit of a blur. If we did 5 pixels, right, it's a little bit sharper. There's no right or wrong answer to how you should use these. It's entirely dependent on what kind of design you're looking for and the aesthetic that you're trying to create on the page. One thing I will say as a word of warning, or as a bit of like design advice, is that your page will look kind of crazy if you're going to use box shadows, if you use different box shadows on different types of elements, because then it's going to look like, if you put a box shadow that was really big, let's do like 20 pixels. Okay. Oh, we can show off an example here. Right. Let's copy these. Right. This one looks like it's jumping out at a bigger height than these two. And if you were to have something in here and say, -5, right? And then maybe -10 here. Right? Now it looks like light is coming from different directions on your page. So the one thing that is like generally good advice is that if you're going to use a box shadow, keep that box shadow consistent across every element that you're going to give a shadow to, right? So if you've got a whole bunch of cards on your page, like in this example, right, where we've got a box shadow, it would look super weird if this card had a box shadow that was at the top and the right, and this one was bigger, right? It would make the page feel incorrect to your eyeballs. That's like generally a good rule of thumb. Now the one example that is kind of the opposite of that, right? So if we were to have this box shadow, right, we've got this beautiful box shadow here. Let's play with this and combine a few of the things we've been playing with so far, right? So we've got a box shadow. Let's maybe make this 5 pixels. Let's make this 10, so it looks. No, let's make this 5. Perfect. Now let's go 5. 5, 5, 5. If I was going to make this interactive, right? So if I was going to do example hover, so that when I hover over this, something changes. If I was to come in here and say box shadow 10px, 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 run this. If I was to go in here and say transition box shadow 1s, why is it not running? Oh, missed example 1. See, attention to detail there. Even I am guilty of not typing the full name of the class of the property. So when I click run now, you'll see that it kind of makes it feel, without even moving the box itself, like the box is exactly in the same spot, but I've moused over it and the box shadow has subtly grown. Do you see that? So it almost feels like it's coming out. So by combining a few extra styles in here, if I was to come in here, for example, and say, when I hover over this, I want to transform and just scale 1.1. Let's see what this does. Okay, perfect. And let's add our transform in here. 1s. Transform. So now I've got it so that it kind of feels like it's popping out of the screen, and our shadow, you'll notice, is getting maybe a little bit blurrier and a little bit bigger. So I would tweak this until it, right, now it feels like, oh my gosh, that's a physical object that is floating over the screen, and it has light coming from the top, and it gets a little blurrier, right? That feels very realistic. And we did this with, 3 lines of code, really. A slight scale and a transition. And we've just now made this feel a little bit more engaging than these do. All of these are just tools that you should have available to you and that should be at your disposal, so that when you're confronted with a product and you're in there building something like this, you should think through those kind of options of what would make the user most happy. What makes this a really cool feeling tool? So I would come in here and play with a lot of these. Once I've got the layout in place, once I've got the structure of everything, I got my colors in place, everything's good, then I would start coming in here, and I would come in here and play with, on the hover, what do we got here? Box hover. I would maybe do transform, scale 1.1, and I would maybe change the what did I use as the box shadow? Let's give this a 3px. Good. Let me give it some blurriness, so that when I'm in here, I make this maybe 9 pixels now, 9 pixels, 9 pixels, and maybe I make it even a little bit wider. Cool. So now it kind of see. I would keep tweaking this until I was happy with the design, but the fact that I'm at right? Maybe I'd want to even make it transform a little faster. So that you start to make these design decisions where you're like, oh, I really like that treatment, but now you've got to go back and change some of your earlier assumptions, because now my shadow is covering up cards underneath it, and the stretching is driving me crazy. I'd probably turn off the stretching and be like, no, we're just going to cap it so that there's no stretching. We're going to limit it to be 50 words like we were talking about yesterday, because I like the scaling, this just transform here, better than I like this text displaying the full amount. So design is an iterative process for me. It may be an iterative process for you, but most designers I've ever worked with will spend, the first day getting the site looking 99% of the way they want it, and then they'll spend the rest of the week working on that last 1% to make it really pop. And they'll tweak these things and iterate, and eventually they'll have something that they're really happy with, but they'll always be like, I need to take extra time next week and work on some more stuff. And everyone will be like, but it looks pretty already. And they'll be like, yeah, but the pixel is wrong. It's off by 4 or something. Designers are a goofy bunch. You'll get to work with some, hopefully. Cool. Any questions about box shadows? The next thing we're going to take a look at is text shadows, right? So if we wanted to add, some, so here let's use this page as an example. I've got this word up here, fake Pinterest. This is my H1. If I was to come into my header, right, where's H1? Is that our header one? Yeah, probably. So if I was to come in here and just, I wanted a shadow here, and I would say box shadow. Let's copy the one from below. Where are we at? Box shadow. Let's use this one. Right. Now the element itself has a shadow, this H1 element, but it looks like it's a little bit jarring because I tried to have that text fit in with the rest of the page, so it has the same. It has the the color of the element that's behind it. So now it looks like it's a black element floating over top of this page. CSS has provided us a solution to this in the form of text shadow. Text shadow is just going to operate on the font. And so now you can see that the font has a shadow behind it. If we took off some of this blur, right? Let's make this 0 pixels. Right? You can see that it's basically mirrored that text behind it. And it's going to use the same format and structure, right? So left and right offset, top and bottom offset, blurriness. Generally, you're going to want to have some blurriness with this, otherwise it's going to give you that kind of mirrored effect where the user can read it, right? And we could even like fully duplicate this, right? So you can do 0px, let's say 16px, right? So we've got, I need to push it down even more. Let's do 24 pixels. Right? So I have a complete clone of the words here, directly offset. Right? You'll notice I cannot highlight this bottom one, but I can highlight. This is the actual text. This is the text shadow below it. So text shadow has the same exact format. So anything that is a text element, like paragraphs, H1s, any text content on your page, can have this text shadow property if you want to make it look like it's flying off the page. Right. So often, what you'll see is very subtle. Right. 5 by 5 by 5, and maybe we will give it a like a color here, right? So it makes it feel like there's some offset. One other interesting effect of text shadow is that if we did not offset it at all, right? So it's going to be 0, 0. directly under or over the text that we're putting in here, but we gave it a blur, so it's going to spread out a little bit, right? This is going to create, I should have made it bigger. Let's make it 10, 15. I picked like a real subtle color. Let's do something like yellow. Right? So you can see that this text now has a bit of a glow to it, right? And if we were to come in here and say, 10, and so you can fiddle with these numbers to make it glow in the direction you want. If we provide an offset, let's say 3 by 3, now it's going to look like it's coming out of the page a little bit. So those offsets are what give it the depth that make it feel correct. Any questions about text shadow? And as always, if you ever want to look at all the possible examples of, because there are a few other things you can do. You can come into text shadow here, go to the W3 Schools reference, and look at all the things. I mean, you can choose a blur radius. That's what we're doing when we set our blur option. Right, so they got some examples that maybe will give you. So here's text shadow being shadowed twice, right? So you could say the first one is 003 with this color, and then it's 005, right? So there's a secondary glow that happens as well. So you can separate these with commas and have two effects happen at the same time. Right? So here's an example of what we could do that would be kind of weird. Let's turn off the blur. Turn off this blur. Right, so let's do negative 20 px, 20 px. Right? Now we've created some kind of weird trippy effect. And maybe what we want to do with our design is say negative 5 px, 5 px. Right? And now I've kind of created this weird, maybe we do want to blur this a little bit. Maybe we make it 3. That's kind of trippy, right? We can do all kinds of interesting things with these CSS properties, combining them in interesting and unique ways. Like, I don't know what you would maybe, if you were going to design some kind of website that was for like doctors or ophthalmologists or whatever, the eye doctors, you might want to have like, a glasses image or something, and then have, some kind of, let's do a div. Oh, here we go. I got an idea. So let's do border 1px solid. Let's make this 4px solid black. Border radius 20px. Right. So that's going to be around 20px. Right. So if you can imagine that this was like a glasses frame or something, right? Let's make this even more extreme. Let's do negative 40. Right? So like when they're in the glasses, they can see clearly, and when they're not, it's blurry. Like, let's make this even bigger. 10. Right? Pretty cool. And we could have put a third one in here, right? Like, so there could be one that's slightly above it. Put another comma in, so that it shows up in the negative 10. We make it like not blurry or less blurry, right? Let's make it black. 0px, right? Something like that, so that all the text that is inside of the circle shows up as crystal clear, and all the text that doesn't shows up as super blurry. Lots of cool options, lots of things you can do using these CSS properties in interesting ways that, anything you can think of to design, you can do with some combination of CSS properties. And these are just some of the fun ones that, you can spend some time polishing and working on with your page. Now, on to something extremely important, okay? This is a relatively new thing in CSS. It used to be that, like, anytime we had colors, right, you see this in these examples, right, I'd have this color here, and maybe I want, medium sea green here, and I'm using it throughout the page. If I ever wanted to change that, I'd have to change it throughout my entire throughout my entire script. Now that's not generally a problem, right? It's pretty easy in most modern editors to say, find and replace, right? I could say every place we have medium sea green, I want to make it, blue, right? And so we could have changed all of those occurrences. CSS 3 introduced variables to us. And the variable format is extremely powerful, and it uses an interesting pseudo element that we haven't discussed yet. So let's look at CSS variables. And the way we use CSS variables, right? This is kind of they're showing off the traditional way, right? You're going to define some colors. You've got a couple, you're using this in a bunch of different places. This 1E90FF is that we now have a root pseudo element, and we can define a property in here and give it a name, right? So it's dash dash and then any word we want. And then we can use that variable, whatever that value was, using the var function anywhere in our code. So a great example, and why this is why we're going to probably end here with this specific thing, is that one of the things that I asked you to do as a part of your group project is you came up with a color palette. Okay, and so how you would do this is that at the very top of your CSS file, you would probably come in here and say root, and you would set, like main theme color is, whatever that color code was. So let's just say medium sea green, okay? And then you would say, accent color, right? And then you'd pick one of the other colors from your swatch. And then anywhere in your code where you wanted to use medium sea green or whatever that color was, you could simply put in var main theme color. Okay? So now everyone can use the same code, and if you ever want to change that instance of that color or that property anywhere else in your code, you only have to change it in one spot. So if you're like, oh man, that green is really driving me crazy, I want it to be blue. You change it here, and any place in your style sheet that is using that color will be changed and updated automatically. That is the root pseudo selector, and you specify the name of your variable prefixed by 2 dashes. And then you can use it in your code with the var function anywhere you want. Now, this example is a particularly bad example. Can anyone tell me why this example is bad from an engineering standpoint? Why is this example bad? Any ideas? Go ahead, Olivia.
Is it because like you have your body background color is blue and then like the container one,
No.
that color is blue?
Not from a design standpoint. I could care less about what the thing looks like. I'm talking purely from a code standpoint. What in here is a bad practice?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Is it because like you reuse like the same on top of your like global root one? Like you use it in multiple places.
No, that's the purpose of doing these variables. Like we want to say, hey, this blue is this, so that if we ever decided we wanted our blue to be a different shade, right, we could say, tutu EEFF, right? So different color blue, and now all of those places get that value. Go ahead, Eric.
What if you don't want it to be blue anymore?
So but if you're reading through this code and you say, I want it to be blue, I use the blue variable, but blue is red. So they have chosen really poor names for their variables, right? You don't want to generally, and this is going to carry over into programming as well, you don't want to name your variable name a specific thing, with very few exceptions. I mean, you might have something in here that was like, brand guidelines green, right? And it's some specific form of green, that is like, this is our company's green color. Okay? The problem with having names as generic as blue and white like this is that the design might change in the future, and now all of our code that says, hey, the background color is var blue, well, that's actually red. You're lying to future developers. You'd probably want to say something like BG color and content BG color, right? Something that describes what goes in that box. So that instead of blue, it would be BG color, BG color, BG color, content BG color, content BG color, right? Does everyone understand this concept? We don't want to name our variables a name that is going to limit us in the future, right? We don't want to say, this is our blue color, if the color could eventually not be blue. Because now all of the places that are going to reference that variable will be referencing a variable that is no longer the contents that it says it is. So pick something generic enough so that you know what these colors are. And in the example of what you guys are doing, you might say, like primary background, right? For like whatever your main, that dark brown or whatever color you choose for your structure. Then you might say, I definitely need a color for my content boxes, right? If you make a box or you want to have, maybe you have a header background, right? Maybe that's a different color for different accents. Maybe you have a footer background, right? Pick names of your variables that you can use forever regardless of what the value is in here. You want it to be descriptive. You want it so that when I'm reading through your style sheet that's 600 lines long, I know that when I get to here and it says, oh, the container is using the content background color, great. That makes perfect sense to me. If this just says white or, blue, right? Okay, what blue is that? Can I use this blue again? I don't know. I have to scroll all the way up to even see what it means. And then I have the possibility of maybe I use it because I want it to be something. And then in the future, the person who originally wrote this style sheet and is like the team's head designer goes through there and says, like, our background color, we're going to rebrand our page and make that color the opposite color. It's going to be black or something. And now your page has maybe got a font that doesn't display on that color because you picked a darker color as your font. So you've got to be very careful in how you name things. This lets us be more descriptive in what the purpose of these colors is. And it also gives us the added benefit of we only have to change the color in one place to change our entire design. Any questions about variables? No? All right. It is 5:54. Let's take another break and come back at 6:10. And then we'll finish out with some engaging work. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this issue because I want to get the site structure set up. And so I've kind of given myself some hints here of what we're going to do. So I'm going to check out a new branch, and I'm going to say get checkout -b. And what I like to do is I like to give it the number first. So I'm going to say 1 dash, right? So whatever this issue number is, 1 dash, structure, right? So now I've created a branch called 1 dash structure. And if I work on another ticket, it's going to be 2 dash something else. So that it helps me keep in mind, like if I ever forget, why was I in this branch? Well, I can go look at issue number 1. It doesn't mean anything special. It's just a tip that I use in all my projects most of the time. All right, so I'm in 1 dash structure. So the thing tells me that we need to make a folder, CSS, right? And I need to make a file in there called styles.css, okay? And I need to make an index.html. It also tells me to make an images readme, right? So if I type get status right now, right, get status, okay, you can see that I have a CSS folder and an index.html because if I type get add CSS, right, get status, you can now see that it caught the file CSS styles.css. If I do get add index.html, it's going to add that as well. If I type get status, Both of those are showing up that they're ready to be committed. So I'm going to do get commit -n. And I'm going to say initial entry of structure. Okay. Now, why did I tell us to make a readme.md file in here? Okay. And the reason is very simple. If I was to just make a new folder, we know we're going to want to have some images in the future. But if I make an images folder and I type get status, it says nothing to commit. Working branch is clean. And that's because Git doesn't care about folders. It only cares about files. It cares about the folder where the file is. So if I was to put a file in here, then it will say, "Oh, I've got a file that I care about, and it's in this folder. Let's do something about it." So I'm going to come in here. It's common practice. I mean, you can either just have a blank file in here. I've worked with some people that will say, they'll just have a placeholder file. It'll just say placeholder or something like that to keep the folder open. But I'm going to make a README, and I'm going to say images folder. This is where we'll use our internal images, right? Logos, favicons, things like that. Okay, so I'm going to create this, and now if I type get status, you'll see that the folder shows up because it knows there's a file in there that we maybe care about. So I'm going to check it in this way just to show off that it works, whether you're typing in the terminal or you're doing this up here. I'm going to say adds readme file to images folder, and I'm going to commit. I'm going to push this up. It's going to tell us branch 1-structure has no upstream branch. It means GitHub does not know about this branch. We just created it. Would you like to publish this? And I'm going to click yes, obviously. That's the whole point. The other thing I'm going to do as a part of this set up the site structure is that I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go into our index.html and I'm just going to tidy things up and get our code ready to go, right? So this is like a part of the structure work, right? So I'm going to, one thing I do, right, this boilerplate code keeps the head and the body lined up with the HTML element. And to me, I mean, it's perfectly valid code, but I like to have everything be indented when it's inside of an element like this, right? So HTML is our root tag. Our first level inside of that is where our HTML and our head and our body go, okay? The other thing I'm going to do is because I know this is going to be our template while we're working on other issues, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just set stuff up a little bit for us. So I'm going to say, what did we decide on the name?
It's film in Augusta.
In Augusta, like that?
Yep.
Cool. And then I'm also going to link rel equals style sheet, href equals css styles.css, right? So I'm getting our style sheet set up for us. So this is pretty much done. I need to check in my code. Well, I'll do it up here. So I'm going to check in our code. I'm going to say implements site template. Good. And I'm going to commit and push. And now what you'll see is that if we were to take a look at our code here, right? This is the main branch, right? It does not have that new work that I gave it. But you can see there's two branches here. 1-structure updated 15 seconds ago by me. So I know this code is good because I just wrote it, but I'm going to do a new pull request. If you guys are writing code, it's almost always a good idea, and most companies will require this, where you're going to not just commit, you write code and you say, this is done, I'm good, I'm just going to merge it in. You're almost always going to have someone that is a reviewer. So for the purposes of this class, until we start divvying out different bits of responsibility, you can go ahead and just make me the reviewer for all this stuff. As we get into further group projects, whoever the project manager is, whoever the stakeholder is, will be the reviewer most of the time. And sometimes, you might want to even have multiple reviewers where you say like, hey, I know Josh, you're our JavaScript expert on the team. Can you take a look at this before, as well? You can have multiple reviewers in here. We can have up to 15. Go ahead, Josh.
So this pull request, it's not the same as a merge request, right?
It's exactly the same as a merge request.
Okay. So why is it not called? Says I just see pull on here, and when I'm thinking pull, I'm thinking from my local computer. I'm trying to pull the information from GitHub.
I don't know the history of why it's called a pull request instead of a merge request. But
So
essentially, what it's
do
doing
we
is-
ever use the terminology like in actual on our command line merge or anything like that, or is that just another?
Yeah, you'll use get merge locally on your computer all the time when you want to bring in code from another branch. This pull request, I think, is specific to. It might even be specific to GitHub. I can't tell you with any certainty. This is a thing they built in to give you a way to review and approve a code before it is merged. So I'll show that off here hopefully in a second. So you'll notice that by default, the name that goes up here is the name of this pull request is the name of the branch. I like to tidy this up a little bit, so I can say like implements site branch site structure. And then if there was any special instructions for the viewers, if you needed to download, you need to have a database in place, you can put that in here as well. The other thing that's really cool is you can say references, and then if you put a pound and then you type in a number 1, you can see that behind the scenes GitHub is pulling in that ticket information. So if I click create pull request right now, what it's doing is it's saying, hey, here is, I want to change the main branch with this branch. It's going to show you all the files that were changed, so it lets me review and see what the actual code changes were. But it also gives us, I'm doing this to myself here, right? So it's kind of silly, but it gives me a place to like comment, ask questions. I can do a review in here, and I can say things like, this is the wrong title, right? Start a review and then request a change. I can request changes. I can't do it because it's my own pull request and I'm the reviewer, right? And what that will do is it's going to show, hey, this is the wrong title in that main view, so that we can see, hey, there's stuff that needs to be done before we're going to allow this to be merged. But in this instance, it's all good. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to click merge pull request. And it says implement site structure. That's the title. So it takes that title and it puts it in here. So this will go in the Git log. But we're going to do something special here. This is a GitHub specific thing. We're going to say closes number 1. And when I do this, GitHub behind the scenes is going to automatically change the status of that issue to closed. So now it's done. I'm going to click confirm merge, and it has been merged. It says you're all set. The one structure branch can be safely deleted. We can leave this branch here. It doesn't cost us anything, but it's a good habit to just go in there, and for stuff that is you're never going to need to check out again, right? You can just delete it. If you ever do this by mistake, you can click restore branch and it'll come right back. But it's not going to clutter up this branch list, right, where there was active branches in here before. So this just cleans that up. But now you'll see if we go to our code, it's got the index.html, it's got the images in the CSS folder, so that's good. And if we go to check out our issues now we have 8 that are open. 1 has been closed. We can still get to it if we click on the close thing. We can see, hey, that's closed. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do before we start handing it off to the rest of you to do the work, set up HTML template structure for us to style. All right, so I'm gonna set this up in our code. All right, so we know we're going to do this as like a a single column type of design, but I'm going to want a header element. Header, right? This is where we're going to shove our logo, and for now I'm just going to put in an H1. We might change this to be an image later if we design something for ourselves, but we can put it in as H1 just as a placeholder. And I'm going to say film in Augusta, right? Then I know that we're going to have a unordered list, most likely, with our links, right? So I'm going to structure this all out with the content that we know we're going to put in here. And so what were our pages before? I have to reference this. Filming location pages. I'm probably gonna have to go read that. Here it is. Where was it at? Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So home. Line. Filming locations. What's the other one? Why Augusta production resources. Right? So all I'm doing is creating the HTML template that we're going to style later. Y Augusta. Production and resources. Production and resources. Okay. What was this? Augusta Film Festival? Augusta Film Festival. Okay. And what was the last one? Contact us. Contact us. Okay. The other thing that jumps out at me is we said we just wanted to have the H1 and the UL and our navigation in the header. I'm probably also going to wrap this entire UL in a nav element. Right? I think that will give us a lot more flexibility when we get into styling, so that we can say, hey, this unordered list specifically that is inside the nav is the one we care about. We might use unordered list everywhere else. We want to be very specific in how we target our styles. Okay, so that's the header. Header's done. The next thing that we asked for in this ticket was the center content area, right? Oh, you notice I did something very bad and I just caught myself before we made any changes. I'm still in the one structure branch. Okay, so I need to get checkout main. Okay, it's going to says your local changes, the following files would be overwritten by checkout. Next section. There's one cool thing that we're getting away with here because we're lucky. Is because one structure is now the same as main because we merged it in. I can check out from here, so I can do get checkout dash B to HTML, right? HTML page, right? So if I check out a branch from here, it's going to be the same as if I checked it out from main after doing a get pull. I'm going to show you, actually, I'm not going to do this, even though we could get away with it. I'm going to show you what I would do if I made a mistake like this, where I was here. Right? I made a whole bunch of changes. You can see that they were here. I'm going to actually just copy all of this code. Oh, I'm going to select all of this code, and I'm just going to open up a new tab in here with the Control N. Right? So I'm on a blank page. I'm going to paste it. Then I'm going to come back to this page. Right? So I haven't lost any of the work I've done, and I'm just going to press Control Z for undo so that it goes back to where it was. I'm actually going to close this entirely. Don't save. And I'm going to discard changes. Right? So now we're back to where get status. Right? So we're up to date with the origin 1 main. I'm going to do get checkout main, get pull. Okay, so now we're in main. We're all up to date with the stuff that we checked in before. Now I'm going to do get checkout from here, get checkout dash B to HTML structure. Okay, so I'm on a new branch now, all caught up. Then I'm going to come into this file, copy my code. I'll show you. I'm going to open the index.html, right? This doesn't have that code we typed in. I'm going to paste it in, and so now we're all caught up. I'm going to not save that one that I just pasted. See what I did there? I didn't create a branch correctly. I didn't do it first, but I had some stuff that I've already been working on. I'm just going to copy it into another file as a placeholder, then go back and do things correctly, and then go back to work. So now we're all caught up. All right, so we've got our header, our H1, we've got our navigation element. The next thing I'm going to add is I'm going to add maybe, I'm just going to make it a div because I don't know what this content is going to be. And we're giving it an ID of content, div ID main, and the class is going to be, I'm just going to do div ID main. It doesn't need a class. So every page is going to have a header, then they're going to have all of the content is going to go inside of this main div ID main, and I'll even leave a comment. All of our content will go in here. Okay. Then at the bottom, we have a footer element. Okay. And remember, these HTML5 special tags are really just divs. They don't do anything special. They just tell us a little bit more about what is supposed to go in there. So this nav, for example, is just us wrapping this UL in a div. I could have, if I was writing this another way, I could have done div class equals navigation. right? Something like that. Something that tells us what this is about. But we're going to use HTML5 and use nicely named elements. Okay? Same with footer, same with header. And header is one that bothers me because we have an actual head element, and then we have a header that means something different inside the body. Kind of stupid, if you ask me, but it is what it is. And our footer, I don't know what's going to go in here yet. I don't think we know what's going to go in here yet, but let's just copy our UL. Let's just copy this whole thing. We might style it differently, and maybe we'll do, let's just put in a div here, and we'll say class equals copyright. We'll say all content copyright. Should it capitalize? Probably. Copyright. And then we're going to use a special, so you can either go find the copyright symbol and paste it in here, or you can do ampersand copy semicolon, which is going to put that in there. It's going to be the copyright symbol. It's just a special HTML character code. And then we'll say 2021 film in Augusta. Right? And we'll close our div. I don't know if this is how we're going to keep things looking in the footer. At this stage, footer is the least important part of the entire product. So we'll probably leave that off for quite a little while. But what we do have here is a structure of a page that looks pretty good. If we were to open this up in our browser here, right? Perfect. So you can imagine, right? This is our header, and just to show this off, I'm gonna not check these changes in, right? I can do header, background, color, medium, aquamarine, right? Div, main, background, color, blue, and then footer, background, color, purple, right? So we don't have anything in our, right, we need something in here. So let's just H1, H2 content. And maybe what we should do is define like div class equals, I'm going to call these blocks maybe, block is a good name, right? So this will be like H2 example content block, right? And we'll put a paragraph tag in here. We'll put in some lorem text, right? P. Just to show off that, like, when we start, because one of these next steps is we're going to design all these different templates, right? We're going to need a form. We're going to need a this. We're going to need a that. And because we're doing one column, each of these little boxes, which we're going to call div class block, we should be able to just copy and paste a bunch of these, right? So block will be our default style, and then if we want to make a special block for the contact form, right? We'll do something like that. It will get a block style, and then it will get a contact form style if we wanted to set up special rules for the contact page. And so a page can consist of one or more of these blocks being put together. So we're just kind of building the Legos that we're going to build this entire product with. Does that make sense? And so now you can see, there's an example content block. So I'm going to take all these out because we're not, this card does not ask me to make the styles yet. But now I'm pretty happy with this, so I'm going to check this in, right? I'm going to say implements HTML, let's say rough HTML structure, right? So it's good enough for us to start doing some work. Okay, then we're going to push this up. It's going to ask us, hey, there's no upstream branch. Yes. We want to create, good. Now we're going to do that exact same process, right? I'm going to create a pull request. Click new. I'm going to pull an HTML structure. I'm going to click create. And we can even, yep, good. I'm not going to put a reviewer because it's silly to do it for myself. And this pull request process works really well when you're doing, when everybody on the team is doing something a little bit different. So what I'm going to do now that we're kind of caught up, right? What's our next issue? Set up HTML structure. Oh, I forgot to close it. So I'm going to have to close this manually because I forgot to close it during the merge. Okay, so I click the close button. So now we're kind of up to this number 3, and this is where I'd like for you guys to take over for the next hour or so, right? So it's 6:49 right now. I think we can work until 7:30 collaboratively. So I would like, I think probably Olivia should drive this project from here. Share your screen, and I want everyone to talk through with their opinions of like what are those block elements that we're going to need to have throughout our page. Okay, and now might be a good time to even start doing some rough designs of like what some of those will look like. So maybe, and maybe we want to farm out some work. So let's maybe just start brainstorming that while Olivia shares her screen. Go ahead, Josh.
So I just had a quick question. So we have kind of like the structure of our main page, and then when we go on to other pages, do we use this main page that we just created to kind of create the bones or the structure of the other pages?
Yeah. So what we're doing right now is exactly that, and this is like how we first started doing web development way back in the 90s. You would make one really good page, and then you would copy that page every time you need a new page. Now, the downside to that is that if you ever add another page, like we're going to have this menu navigation, right? Every page that we build, if we added new pages, we'd have to go into every previous page and add that menu in. All right, so this type of role used to be called like a webmaster, because literally every time there was a change that needed to be made, you had to edit 50 different files. It was a giant pain in the butt. Luckily, we are going to learn programming in this course, where we're going to do web pages that are dynamic. And so we'll be able to start using templates. So we'll build one big template like this, and then every one of the content pages can be plugged into that template without us needing to code a bunch of different stuff. And so we'll be able to do that in like 3 weeks when we get to that portion. Right now we're kind of learning, we're in the crawl phase, right? So we're just now learning to crawl before we can start walking and running.
So that template, is it almost kind of like what we just learned, like a variable, like you just set the set template, and then anytime you make a change, it'll just...
It's going to depend on a bunch of different things. So there are a bunch of different templating languages, and we're going to learn Node.js in this course. So we're going to pick one of those templating languages called EJS, and we're going to use that. And it's got a couple different quirks. So generally, you're still going to build an HTML type of file, but you'll be able to plug in different variables and bring in other files as well. And we'll show that off. If you work in something like PHP, that's a templating language all of its own. Ruby on Rails does things completely differently. So all of these technologies have a different approach to how to do templates. But we'll discuss that when we get there.
So this main HTML that we just created, we won't actually go in there and actually put in actual content, because this is just going to be like our outline for every other.
We want to spend a little bit of time making this look good,
mm-hmm.
so that then when we say Josh is going to work on this page and Olivia's going to work on that page, you guys can all copy this page over and actually just start putting in the content.
So my question is, though, like, will that main that we just created, will they ever style that? Because say if this was a real project, say in 1 year, we want to create another page, but we had already started styling that main page. When we go to copy it, we're going to have to delete a bunch of stuff, because there might not be the same content and all that in the new page. Am I making sense?
CSS is giving us a lot. I think what you're asking is, we're going to do all of our styling in our CSS. So as long as we're using good class names in any page we make in the future, and as long as we have the same sort of structure where you got a header element and a footer element and a content div,
okay, and
we've got all these different blocks that we're going to build, if you ever needed to add a new type in the future, all you would have to do is just go add a new style in the style sheet for that class.
I got you.
Because all of these pages are going to use the same style sheet.
Okay.
I hope I answered your question, but if I didn't, I promise you we will hopefully make this clear as we learn more technologies. Because a lot of the things we're doing right now aren't good things. They're just necessary for what you know already. All right. Olivia, take it away. what I recommend you do is that you go to your index.html page and you start taking those, like you see how I've created 2 blocks here. Start thinking about all the different types of blocks you're going to need for each page, whether it's just a block that says some information, it's got a paragraph, maybe it's a block that has... So I would maybe define it as like a block by default is going to have like a heading and some text. That's like a default block. Then as you get more complicated, because the block is going to be full width, right? So as you get into things like, okay, well, this block needs a big contact form on the left and some information on the right. Those blocks would get, it would be a, it's still the block class, but it's got a new class that goes with it. So start brainstorming with the rest of the team. Create all the blocks that you think might need to exist. So you've already kind of laid this out in your thing, right? So the filming locations page.
So like you're saying, make more blocks in HTML right now? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm thinking like the first block underneath the nav would be like a big hero image.
So that alone is like a generic enough block that I think is a perfect example. So you do div class block and then hero.
So also while you're watching, mine automatically makes the closing one, which annoys me sometimes. Is there a way to take that off?
I haven't figured it out.
Okay.
I know that it's possible. VS Code is extremely customizable. It drives me bonkers. But I don't like any of those autocomplete things at all. So.
Okay, so then you said div class
block, and then space hero, right? So we're creating. And so what I would maybe do, because we're going to use this as a template, is don't design the page like you're designing a real page. It doesn't matter the order they're in. We're trying to create like a design language that the rest of the people working on this project, so everyone in this class, can reference when they're building their pages. So if you needed a hero in your page, you would just copy, so like block space hero, similarly to how we did on line 41.
Okay.
So what I would do if this was me, I would just keep div class block as the topmost one, and every time I want to create a new block, I would copy that. I would copy those 4 lines and paste it below it, and then start adding the stuff that I think will go in that block.
Okay.
Right, so I would put hero here. And you probably want to make that lowercase h. And so the hero is probably, what is the hero going to have? It's going to have some big heading usually, or at least have the option for a big heading, right? You're going to have some words up there.
I was just thinking an image,
so
and then
just an image by itself, no text
or
buttons.
maybe like text on top of the image.
Okay, so how much text do you think you'd need to have?
Not much. Probably just put. I don't know.
So let's in this case, right? You're designing the structure of what this hero block will be. Maybe just take out the paragraph tag and you say, hey, our heroes are going to have an H2 and nothing else.
Okay. And then I was thinking underneath that would be like a paragraph block or something, like, a little blurb about what Film in Augusta is with a header.
So we're trying to think structurally. So what's the next block? So this would be like a regular text block that explains what we are?
Yeah, like a text,
so
like a call to action block.
You would just have it like just a regular block. Oh, but you said something interesting here, right? We're not trying to lay out the page now. We're trying to set up all the blocks that we're going to use in other pages. So you don't need to think about it linearly from top to bottom like you're trying to work on a page. We're trying to make an example reference that everyone else can use on the team to go and build pages from. Go ahead, Karif.
Okay, I get what he's saying. He's saying what we need to do now is go in, make all of our contact blocks, all of our menus and everything, so that we have consistency across all the pages.
Oh,
is that what you're saying?
I got you.
Yeah, I'm saying what we're working on right now is not any individual page. We're making a page that hopefully will have all of the blocks that we're going to use across the entire site. So
I was lost for a second.
Yeah, we can then start to design so that we can then break off and everybody can pick a different page. And if Olivia's working on the home page, she can choose which blocks to use and in which order. So she'll just
that also answered my question too.
Okay,
My
that
previous question a little bit better.
Okay. Now, I would never work like this when we start learning programming later on. This is a kind of an inefficient way, but this is what we would have done in the 90s if we were working on just pure HTML pages. You're going to want to have a really nice, clean, pristine template page that you can build all your other pages off of, so you don't have to redo all this work every time.
Okay. So in other words, we're learning to handwrite before we learn to type.
Correct.
Got it. So what we're doing here is he wants us to make templates so that we can copy and paste to our other pages.
Mm-hmm. So any type of template, any type of block that you may need to use in this project, we want to create a example block showing that in use, right? So we've got block hero, and you'll notice the only difference between block hero and block contact form or whatever, and block content form is a great example because that one's not correct. Block hero just has header text, okay? But as we get, if we make block contact form, okay, you're still going to have header text, but then you're also going to have a form in there, and you're going to have maybe some instructions for the form, so that maybe it's left and right. If it's a form, maybe you put the form on the left and the instructions on the right. Maybe on another page, we might have a form that has the form on the right and instructions on the left. Or maybe it's a grid where you've got like a list of titles that go in a carousel, right? So we're designing the structure of all of our future pages right now. So each one of these blocks, because we already have div class block, that's the basic. It's a heading with some text in it. Every block we put on this sheet from here on out, from top down, is going to be a different class. So it's going to be block, space, and then some other class that we can then style. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool.
Do you think it would be easier for us to visualize if we just go through your sitemap and just go like, okay, filming location, what do we think we'll need for inside there? That way we can kind of visualize things a little bit easier. And then go to Y Augusta, production and resources.
Oh God, how do I look at it? Then just look at it in my Finder. So for filming locations, a search page, I guess that would be a form again.
Okay, so what is the search page itself? What is it going to have?
It's going to have a list of all the locations that are available to film.
Okay, so this is to like reserve or book a spot?
Yeah, and to like just look sort of like how Zillow is. You can see a list of all the available houses.
Okay, so to me, right, that's the filming locations maybe is 3 blocks, right? The top block is the form itself. That is a full width form. You're gonna have to design something really nice that says like, what are you searching for? Maybe it's got some check boxes for like price points and things like that. The second block would be a search results. All right, so if you search and you find some stuff, that would go in that second block. And then you've got a submit your location option in here. I think that's probably a separate page.
Yeah,
you can imagine there's going to be a button on there that you click it, and it's going to be a submit your location.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably needs to be another page. We would probably, I mean, to me, this feels like almost in a critical part of the product. I would almost put that at the same level as being as important as or more important than some of those other things that we already have in our main menu.
So like when I did these bottom page, they would be like drop downs, like sub pages. So.
Okay. So what happens when you click on filming locations? What is on that page?
It would just be like information about filming locations. There'd be a search bar, and underneath it be another button like submit your location. It takes you to that submit your location page.
Okay. Oh, was that from the menu standpoint?
This is really, really hard for me to describe without designing it too. So Sorry if I'm bad with words. I don't know
No,
if it's making sense.
This is the
Okay.
entire reason we do this type of exercise. It's supposed to be hard and painful because we're trying to get you guys to start thinking like a software engineer. Where a customer is going to come to you and say, "I need a website to do filming locations," and you're going to ask these types of questions to drive down into what am I actually going to build for them? What is it going to look like? How is it going to function? Because the how is it going to function part is the hardest part of all of this. What if you're in a design role, what is it going to look like is probably a pretty hard question as well. But we're trying to break ourselves out of the barrier of I'm just going to build something, because you have to be able to work in this field. You have to be able to do what is asked of you, get to the root of what they're trying to accomplish, and solve their problems. You're not being paid to code. You're not being paid to make colors. You're being paid to solve somebody else's problem. And we have to be able to get there logically using best practices. We have to analyze. We have to ask questions. We have to dig in so that there's a consistency and a structure. Because if we just go in without a plan, we're going to end up with something that nobody likes or nobody's happy with. So this is why we're practicing this, right? In the last class, we didn't start doing this until the final class project. I'm trying to see if we can get through the painful parts earlier on in the process, so that when we get to the final class project at the end, you guys are going to be pros at this. Go ahead, Kreef.
Yeah, can I recommend that before we go into the HTML, we sit down and lay out how you want the pages to look, so that we have some idea of where we're going? Because if we just start coding, we may do some stuff that we don't really want or use. Like for your search, are we going to search Google? Are we going to search another website? That's
No, I get what you're saying, but it would be a built-in search in your website.
Yeah, this
so
is an application page for us. We're going to build the search. We're going to have, when we learned coding, we would have a database behind the scenes of all the locations that our users have submitted. And so when we search and we say, I'm looking for something that I can rent for $100 a day, that is a house with, made of brick, a brick house.
okay. So we're going to create our own database and not use. Okay, all right.
But because we haven't learned programming yet, we're just going to mock it up. We're going to do the design and make it look like a functional page, just in HTML and just in CSS, so that if we do revisit this when we come back with some programming experience, we can just add the database and add the functionality pretty quickly, because we've got a beautiful page designed and ready to go.
Okay, I'm following.
Okay, so I think if I go back and look at this sitemap, for me, when I work, I like to do the snowball effect and do the easiest thing first, so I get excited to do the hard parts, or am motivated more. So let's see. The contact us page, it will include a form. That's what I'm visualizing. A photo of this fake Augusta film coordinator, and then this block would have a picture and text beside it. So I guess that would be called profile block, maybe.
Okay.
And that would have a header. The image one. And let's see, maybe a map, so we could do a block of a.
Oh yeah, I like
map,
that.
A map block. And I don't know what code I should put for that.
I would maybe even just leave. You can either leave the heading and say map or location address, and then below it, instead of a paragraph, you would probably just put in a div, and then give it an ID of map.
Okay, below it and do a
div. Just take out the paragraph altogether, because you're gonna probably drop in something like Google Maps or something, right?
Yeah.
So maybe even just leave a comment like Google Map goes here.
Okay, so we have that block. So I think that was pretty much it for that page. Augusta Film Festival.
Okay, so
Made...
on that map block, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing it in the context of like this is how to find us, you probably would also have this be 2-column as well, right? Because most places will say like here's our address, here's our phone number. So you'd have a div that has that information either to the left or right of the actual map element.
So would I make that in this div, like underneath it? Okay.
So if you put it underneath it, that says to me structurally that you kind of think that the address, the phone number, and that sort of stuff is going to appear to the right of the map, or below the map, maybe.
So would I give this another class name?
Yeah, I would maybe say class equals address. And you probably want to put that, not an H2, because H2 is already the heading level of the block itself. So to me, logically, this should maybe be an H3.
Okay.
And maybe this should be like a definition list or something, or an unordered list. I'm not sure what would make the most sense here, because you're going to have basically like each line is going to be like street address, office address, zip code, and then the next line would maybe be like phone number as a colon. Cool. And you don't have to fill out all the content at this stage, right? We're just trying to like think of what elements will be here that we need to worry about when we go to style this main template.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else for contact us block? No? Okay. Ooh, okay, the film festival page. Tickets and passes. I'm thinking maybe something sort of like your Pinterest blocks, how each block had like different levels of, well, the tickets can be different levels, like, VIP ticket and pass, or general admission, sort of those kind of blocks.
Is the Augusta Film Festival a real thing? No, so we're going to make a film festival. Yeah, so I think like, I was kind of viewing this not as sub-pages. I like the structure of this sitemap. I think the Augusta Film Festival is its own unique page, and I kind of like the blocks that you have here underneath it, right? You've got about at the top where you say, and maybe, thinking through using some of the blocks we already have, maybe that's a hero block first. Then there's a blurb using just a regular block right below that says, this is what the Augusta Film Festival is, this is what we're about. Then the next block is if you want to be in the 2022 Augusta Film Festival, here's how you submit your work. And that block just has a link that takes you to a submit page that doesn't exist yet. Then it has a block that shows the previous winner or previous winners. Maybe that's a carousel view, or maybe it shows like, some kind of cutesy little logo. And then maybe there's a buy tickets block at the bottom that will eventually take you to another page for buying tickets.
Okay.
But I'm thinking of it structurally like a marketing page for the Augusta Film Festival, where you're saying, at the very top, here's what it's about, here's how you submit work, here's how you be considered, here's the previous winner.
Okay.
It's like a flow that takes you to calls of action based on like, because you're going to have two audiences of the page, right? You're going to have one audience is the filmmaker, you want them to submit their work, and the second audience is the moviegoer, you want them to buy tickets to go see the movies.
Yes.
So we already have a hero block. We probably need a call to action block, right? Where it's going to have a headline, some text, and a button where we want them to click it.
Okay, headline, some text, and then a button.
Yeah, and I would maybe even, for the purposes of this template, make it more generic. And I would just put call to action in here because we're going to use this same block on other pages where we want them to take an action. So in this case, when you're building that Augusta Film Festival page, you would use the call to action block, and then you would change the button name to be something real. We probably need to wrap the button inside of a div, because a button is an inline element. And we might even have a form in there at some point. No, probably not. It might end up just being an anchor tag, because it's going to take us to another page. Yeah. I probably shouldn't have a button in there as a class. Call to action is probably good enough.
Okay.
And then you put the button inside of that. So what we want inside of all of our blocks is block level elements, so like heading tags, divs, paragraph tags, so that we can position those block level elements, whether we're using a flex box or we're floating or we're making them have a margin auto or it's top to bottom. We want every element inside of there to be something that is block level. I would have done probably the same thing in the profile block up there at the top, right? Image is not a block level element. We probably, if we were treating this like this is important, we want to show somebody's picture, we want to put that in a div. Cool. Sorry for not catching that before.
Oh, it's okay.
No, I apologize. That's my fault.
All right.
All right, great. Perfect. All right, call to action. What else did you say? There was you want a block to show off past winners. So what do you want this block to be? Is there one winner of the festival, or are there multiple winners of the festival?
I'm assuming this has happened for many years, so numerous winners.
Okay, so maybe you would need to have like a reverse timeline where it says like 2020 winner was this, and right next to it is 2019, and then right next to it is 2018, so they can scroll through this list of films that have won. Or maybe it's top-down list. How do you envision this looking?
Like a carousel.
Okay, perfect.
So I would name this
block carousel, maybe.
Okay, I spelled that right.
And so to me, this has a header, and then it instead of text, it has a div of carousel in there. So you're going to have some kind of heading, and then just a div with carousel. And maybe you can, as an example, you can't use the same class because then if we style carousel.
Oh.
Yeah. So maybe we call this carousel items. No, it's got to be all one word. Yep. And then inside of it, we probably want to have a bunch of cards. So like a div class card or something. And it probably has a picture and like a title, maybe.
In the H2? Or
I would maybe make an H3,
okay.
like, because we already have an H2 in this level. We want to always descend, right? Unless it's the same strength. Like when we have these heading elements, we're saying, like, this is important. Pay attention to it. But if it's inside of an element that has one of those already, like, it makes more sense to go down a number. All right, and then what I would do, just to show like future developers that this is like supposed to be a carousel, I would copy div class card exactly how it is. I would copy that like 2 or 3 times in here. Oh no, just the card inside the carousel items.
Will we change the class name from card, like card 1,
Nope.
card 2, card 3? They all be card?
Yep, they'll all be card. Right, and this just gives us something structurally that we can style. So we can say any card inside carousel items is going to look like this. It's going to have an image that's at top, and it's going to maybe have a specific dimensions. It's going to have a movie name underneath it. Perfect. This is great. Okay. Then what was the last thing? A purchase tickets thing?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we might be able to just reuse call to action, right? Like,
Okay.
it's a block with text that has a button where we get them to say, like, sign up today, get tickets. Unless you wanted to build a full, like, form to purchase actual tickets for whatever days are available or something. That's an option too. If you're going to build something unique, nothing's stopping you from doing so.
Okay. Maybe film facts could be an accordion block.
Okay, so like you'll have a whole bunch of questions or like a little blurb, and then they click it and it expands and shows some more info. Cool. Yeah, I like that. And don't forget to put block in there. I think it's ON, isn't it?
Accordion.
Oh gosh, now I'm second guessing myself. Yeah, it's ON.
Good job. I'm a millennial. We just look at picture books. We don't know how to read. Just kidding. All right.
I'm a millennial too, technically.
All right. So we did the class, and then so would I do like a H3 for the question, and then inside of it, the answer would be like a paragraph.
It's up to you.
Okay.
I think the block, it probably needs a heading, an H2, to say like, this is our frequently asked questions or whatever. That's the heading of this type of element. Then it needs a div or some kind of structure that is a block level element. So what are your questions going to look? So it's going to be a question followed by an answer. This to me screams definition lists, where you've got like if you remember that from the other day, it's like a question and then it's got an answer below it.
I don't remember the tag for the definition. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I don't use this very often. Let me see. So I know it's DL is the description list element. So it's kind of like a UL or an OL. So DL. And then it has a DT is the question.
Okay, no, no.
And DD is the answer.
How old do you have to be to? How old do you have to be to? Age requirement.
Yeah, I wouldn't focus so much on the content at this stage. It's just,
okay.
We're just creating a structure so that we can all use it. Right? Question, yeah, and then DD is the answer. Yep. And then I would maybe just copy those one or two more times just to show it off so we have something to style and play with a couple of design ideas? Good. That says answer TWIP.
Okay.
Cool. All right, what other pages, what other blocks might we need? So that takes care of the film festival one. Film tax, file permit. So that's going to be, we're probably going to want like a nicely designed form. So we're probably going to make a block that is block form. And we're going to want to style our inputs and labels so that it looks really clean, because we're going to have to use this form on a bunch of different pages.
Okay. And then what?
Yeah, form. So the form tag.
So.
And then inside the form, the things that we probably want to style is at a very minimum. Yeah, we're gonna want to hit enter so that the form tag is on the next line. Okay. So let's just think of it from like outside working in, right? So the next thing I'd probably want to put in here is a field set. So the field set tag. Okay. And then inside of that, we're going to need a legend tag.
Okay.
And the word we'll put in here is just like section.
Oh.
Yeah, just a word. And just so when we're looking at this and we're starting to style it, we can see. Yep, perfect. We can see what it's going to look like when we start adding styles from our style sheet. Then below the legend, or outside of the field set. So that whole field set block needs to be indented. Yeah. So you can just perfect and hit tab once. Perfect. So after the legend, let's put in just a few form elements. We really just need one or two to show off what we're doing when we style this, right? So leave the legend element. Go down to like line 118.
Okay.
No, you got to get outside of the legend.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Legend is just the name that goes in the field set. So section is going to be the name of that first field set. So we're going to need a label. And, yep. And then the label has a word in it, so we'll say like name or yep. And then close the label. Okay, and now we're going to have input type equals text. Perfect. We can close that out. And then let's just put in input type submit. So we built like the bare minimum form. It's not going to do anything because we didn't put an action in here. It doesn't do anything, but we're going to have something on the page that we can then apply CSS rules to make sure that our forms are all going to look pretty. Okay? So now we got forms taken care of. Good. That block is done.
Cool.
Hmm. What else do we need?
I can't think of anything else.
Hire talent. What is that going to be? Like a list of people available to be used, or is that another form?
That would
Like
be
a search
another
box?
form.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll have a form that's a search box, and then we'll have a search results. So we need a search results block. We're going to need it for both the locations and for people to hire, right?
So you said search results.
Yeah.
And you said another form.
No, this will be like a list, right? So
Oh, okay.
think of it like an ordered list, right? Search result number 1 is this person. Search result number 2 is this person. Or if you're using the search results for the locations, location 1 is this. It's 8 miles away.
Is it OL?
Yeah. The reason it's showing
Okay.
up as red is because you
Oh, I
you
see.
don't have a.
Oh.
Yeah. And then it created a closing div for you. That's an annoying feature. I hate it. While you're typing that out, I'm going to hunt around and see if I can find the place to turn that off. Preferences.
What am I typing again? Search results. What did you tell me to type in the search results in the list?
So, I mean, it's just a list of results, right? So it would be
Okay.
like, you don't have to put anything
Results
in here.
1.
Yeah,
Okay.
Result 1, result 2, result 3. Yep. And this type of block probably will also need a heading element of some kind, like an H2 above that, to say like your search results, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe a search results always has to be used with a search input. I don't know. We'll have to think about that when we start styling. But each individual page can always, take out and remove elements if they don't feel like it fits the flow of their page. Like, we just have result 1 here, but when you're actually building the results for the people search, right, they're gonna have names in there, maybe a contact information, maybe a profile page that it links to. Whereas the location is probably going to say like, here's the location, here's a picture of the house, here's a picture of the location. So each page will be uniquely themed using one of these existing blocks. We're just trying to are the search results block, is it always going to have the same background color? These are the questions we're trying to answer at this stage when we go forward. Cool. I think we made excellent progress on this. Is there any other blocks that you think we need to add at this stage?
I don't think so.
Okay. Cool. All right, so we can probably call this a stopping point for this specific issue. You can commit your change and submit a pull request. Oh, were you working in a branch? We didn't check that, did we?
Let's see. I don't think so.
No, you're in Maine.
Yeah.
So, let's do that same thing that I had to do. Let's copy all of our code into a new tab. So I think for you it's Command N, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. And then paste.
All right. So
then we're going to go to the in the GitHub. Let's just close this tab, the index.html tab. Yep. Now let's go to our version control option on the third icon over on the left, and you see where it says, we're just going to click the undo arrow. So discard all those changes. Okay. Now we're going to do get checkout -b. And what is this, ticket number 3?
Oh, yeah.
So 3 dash blocks. Right? Just give it a name that we won't forget easily. Okay, perfect. Now copy this, all this HTML that you have here. It should be like Command A.
This work. Yes. Okay.
And then open up index.html. Perfect. Cut all that out. Yeah, just hit backspace, I think. And then Command V. Perfect. And then save, commit, push. Perfect.
Okay, and then I would go back to GitHub and
Correct.
merge them.
Yeah, you create a pull request. And so now we're going to try it with the way that I hope I want you guys to work for the remainder of this project, is that you're going to, click compare and pull request, and you're going to select me as the reviewer. Perfect.
This one or the, okay.
Yeah, we can do the top one. That's the same account.
Okay, then.
And then if there was anything I needed to know about this pull request, you can put those information in there, or just put please review or leave it blank. Either one's fine.
Okay.
And now I'm going to share my screen because your part is done. Good job.
So I don't have to hit
Nope.
merge pull request.
Generally,
you have to approve.
The reviewer does the merging, or
okay.
When you work in a company, there might be a system of checks and balances behind the scene. They might actually like automatically check your code to make sure it's correct. There's a lot of processes that normally go into this kind of thing. So I'm going to share my screen and show you kind of my workflow. You did an excellent job, Olivia. That was awesome for your first time, and it's super tense coding with people watching you, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know how you've been doing this for 2 weeks because I feel like lost in the sauce now.
Yeah.
I was like, I know this stuff, but I don't.
Yeah, it's a good habit to have because you will be in your. It's a good thing to practice from time to time. Like when we get into interviewing prep at the end of this course, this is one of the things that trips people up, is that when they're put on the spot in an interview procedure, they might be like, all right, code up how to do this on the whiteboard. And you know how to do it, but you're used to doing it in a text editor. And when you like get taken out of that frame of thought, it really throws people for a loop. And it might be the difference between getting a job and not getting a job. So we're going to practice this kind of thing, screen sharing, coding under pressure, as much as possible. Because the more comfortable you can get with this, the better you're going to look compared to anyone else looking for a job in the future. So I'm going to click on pull request. Right, I got an email that said, "Hey, Olivia's finished this work. Please go check this code." I'm going to come in here. If there's any instructions in here to me, I'm going to be like, "Okay, what does that mean?" Everything here looks good though, right? And then my first step is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to check this out. I'm going to say, what has changed? All right, this is all in index.html. If there were multiple files that were changed, right, this would have every file that was changed and all the things that are in here, right? So a plus and the green means this is a brand new line. This wasn't there before. And so you can see that now she's added all these new lines, 92 additions. If there was anything that was changed, there would be a line that was red showing what it used to be and a line that's green below it showing what it is now. We watched you code this live, so there's nothing I need to really review. But, you know, as a reviewer, I'm in here looking for like, is there anything that's wrong? Is there any problems in the code? Then if it's something really severe, like obviously this is a template, it doesn't really matter that much in the grand scheme of things, and we're early in the project. But if this was actual code that was doing stuff, I'm looking for things that can cause problems. I might even just check out this branch myself and run it locally and verify that everything works the way it's supposed to, right? But this all looks good. No missing quotes anywhere. Everything's correctish. If I had, you know, if we were working in a company and this was my team, you know, I might say, hey, this is not the way we name our classes or something like that. You need to fix this, right? And I would reject it and ask her to make changes, right? I can say request changes and put some information here. But this is all good, so I'm going to approve it. She's going to get a notification probably saying that it was approved. You're going to get one approval. Oh. Right? Oh, because I'm logged into this account. That's stupid. But then I'm going to click merge pull request, and it's good. And so now, when everyone else is starting to work on their stuff, they're going to do a get pull or a get fetch to make sure that we get all this code ready to go. Now tomorrow, during lab time, we're going to have a little bit of homework that is fun, and then we have a shortened lab. Oh, no, you know what? We'll just keep working on this tomorrow in class. I'm going to submit some homework that is like a fun little flex box game where you're moving a frog around. That one's really fun, and so we're going to do that for homework tomorrow. Tomorrow is our day to have a guest speaker, so we'll have to be here at 3:30. The guest speaker tomorrow, let's find out who that is. Drive. Hopefully somebody interesting. Cool. Oh, Schuster Braun, great. Schuster used to teach this course like 3 or 4 cohorts ago. So he's a former instructor. And he's going to talk to you about JavaScript and get you start thinking about it, because next week we start talking about JavaScript. So hopefully getting you into that frame of mind. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I remember Schuster because like a couple years ago in 2019, I'd come to the clubhouse trying to get a job as a TA, and I'd interviewed with him, and he accepted me. But I had actually gotten the job at Rural Sourcing at the same time, so I had to decline. But yeah, so I kind of remember him.
Good. Well, he's hopefully going to talk to us tomorrow at 3:30, and then what we'll do is we'll continue working on this project at least for the rest of this week. Hopefully, we'll finish out a little bit tomorrow. Maybe we can start working collaboratively if we can get the design done in time, so that we can maybe assign everyone an individual page so we can see how this will work in a group setting, and just knock out some of these page designs. Then next week we're gonna start learning about JavaScript. We're probably gonna use this project to start injecting some interactivity. We'll use this as a continued work going forward for next week as we start learning JavaScript. But there's a lot of learning next week. Any questions? The homework for tonight is a really cool app called Flexbox Froggy. Let me see if I can find a link to it. I'll just release the homework now, but edit. Good. Assign, due date tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Thursday? Yep. And what you do is it takes you like through 30 exercises where you're moving a little frog around the screen. I'm gonna show you like level 1, and it gets progressively harder using CSS completely. And all we ask you to do in this homework is when you get to the left, however far you can get, you should hopefully be able to get all the way through. Just take a screenshot and upload it so we can verify that you did the exercise. But this is Flexbox Froggy. See, I'm on level 24 already. Right? And so it will start out looking like this, and it's going to say, hey, welcome to the game where you're trying to move the frog to the lily pad. And it's going to say, here's our CSS rules, and it's going to tell you some of the things that it expects you to do in this exercise. So you get one line to write a line of code, and this is lesson 1, so it kind of gives you the answer right here. You're going to say justify content flex end, right? And it says, yay, we're good, and it moves you to the next exercise. And now level 2 starts you out like this, where you've got frogs off like that, and you need to move the green frog to there and the yellow frog to there, and then it's telling you, using justify content again, the thing we just learned about, get them to match. So the answer here would be justify content center, right? And if you change it to one of these other ones, like you can play through these options. You could say flex start, or let's do space between, maybe space between. Right? You can see that doesn't make them land on lily pads. And then it gets harder and harder because it expects you now to know justify content is one of the choices you can have. So then slide 3, it's going to ask you a different question using maybe align items or something like that. But you'll have to remember you can also do justify content. So it's going to walk you through some of the Flexbox stuff you can do. And then when you're done, take a screenshot. Have a screenshot with this open so we can maybe see, hey, you didn't just skip to question 24 and get it done, right? Cool. All right. Any questions? You guys did great. Everyone give Olivia a huge round of applause for her being the first victim of having to act like a professional engineer and show us what she's doing while she's doing it. It's stressful and it takes practice. There's no shortcut to getting good at coding while people are watching you.